Hello, welcome, and a very good evening to today's episode. And I want to repair a Commodore 1541 disk drive. I have two broken examples, and the people here who know their way around the Commodore disk drives can already guess which drive has which problems, perhaps. The right one here with the nice mechanism here, which is of the Mitsumi variety, works from an electrical standpoint. Basically, the PCB inside and the whole processor thingy works, and we'll take a closer look at how these things are structured and work. But the mechanism here doesn't work anymore. The read head is fried, which is a very typical problem with Mitsumi style drives. And there are a lot of those that don't work anymore nowadays. The why and how we can probably talk a bit more later about, whereas these very archaic looking ones with the Alps mechanism, with this latch, they usually last pretty well. I have two of similar kind still working, and they are very old. They are like 35 years old, or much older, up to 40 years, and still running, whereas these are often a bit younger and already dead. The drive on the left here, however, has some problem on its PCB. I'm not sure which problem. The guy from the forum gave this to me for the mechanism, but he said, yeah, you can also have the whole drive, which is nice because actually the case here is better than this one, because this one has got like these marks here where the cables melted basically into the plastic due to the there's like chemicals which make the rubber nice and soft, but they also melt other plastic. And this is also less yellowed. However, since the screws are missing on the bottom, the guy from the forum taped over there, and I have to clean it first. This is not a big problem. We can get this off with I don't know, some stuff. We have to disassemble it completely anyway. So what I suggest to do is basically take the mechanism, the transformer, and the case from this thing here, use the PCB and the screws from this one, also the LED, because the power LED is missing on this one, and maybe we can mix and match something together, that we get at least one working drive, because there are no repair methods for the problem that this mechanism has, which is a shame, but that's how it is actually at the moment. So what we'll do now is we will take this apart, clean it, and then try and put together a working thing. And as a bonus, we will try and figure out what on the PCB on this one here might be broken. If it's like the power supply, or maybe a failed ROM chip or something else. Maybe we can figure something out. Often the ROM chips are burned out or something, and that's an easy fix. Actually, maybe we can even start with that, but maybe it's easier to just swap the whole PCB, because I know that the PCB here works, the drive commands are working, the head moves and everything, but just no data is coming from the heads. Okay, let's get going. All right, so this is the drive, obviously, with the Black Alps mechanism, which supposedly is good, and where something on the PCB here is bad. Just as a general reminder for you who don't know much about the 1541, oh, this is going to be fun. There's a pretty messed up screw, but I can still turn it out. But I think I will throw it right away because the head is completely gone, basically. There's another one here. The 1541 is an interesting floppy because, contrary to, for example, PC floppy drives, which are much more compact, just like this size or something, this one, first of all, has a whole power supply integrated. So there's a big transformer Underneath here, right in this area, 2 voltage regulators are here for the, I think, 5 and 12 volts, I think. That should be the 5 volt and that should be the 12 volt regulator with a big heatsink. Also huge rectifiers here. And it has got a whole little computer up here, which is pretty similar to the PET or VIC design-wise, because it uses the same CPU. There's the MOS 6502, this one here being from 1983, mid-1983. There's 2 6522s, which are the VIA chips, the versatile interface adapter. And there are 2 ROM chips with the DOS ROM. And this should be the SRAM by Hitachi, I think. This is basically the random access memory for the whole computer on here. And this here is, I'm not exactly sure, looks like a ROM chip. Well, I would have to look it up. Anyway, this is a bit support logic, reset circuitry, stuff like that. More or less things to drive the actual mechanism. Yeah, so it's basically a whole computer, and that's what it actually is. And there are even things that bypass the ROM and drive the serial interface on here at a much higher speed, so-called interrupt loaders and things like that, which give modern homebrew games and demo scene productions much higher performance than was originally achieved by Commodore, which is nice, but it also made the whole drive much more expensive. For example, compared to other home computer systems by the time. From what I heard, for example, the Apple drives for the Apple II were much cheaper because they didn't include all that stuff. But there was a rather clever and cheap floppy controller available. And PCs also had the floppy controller inside of the PC, so the drives were much cheaper. On the other hand, you had, well, a cheaper base unit with the C64, and many people only had one drive, so it was okay to pay a little bit more for the drive once you had enough money. And if you didn't have enough money, you were just using the dataset, and that was that. This screw also doesn't look particularly great. So I'm gonna unplug all these cables here. This should be the LED, power LED cable, I think, which is missing because there's no power LED here. But other than that, I think we can, take all this out here. These are all the connections to the mechanism down below. This is the power supply coming in here. And we can still later on try to figure out if any of these chips are bad. If the 6502 is still good and all the other chips, maybe the ROM, one of the ROM chips is bad, that would be neat. Let's have a look underneath here. Yeah, this is the transformer. There is supposedly also a mod to bring this up to 240 volts. I think maybe using one of the terminals over here on the primary side. I have to check that out. A lot of people still drive them with 240 volts, even though they were designed for 220 volts. 40 years back, the mains voltage was a little bit lower here in Europe and Germany. So you will have a slightly higher output voltage here, so the voltage regulators will have to bleed off more power and run a bit hotter, so to speak. These things are also, I think, they're not produced anymore, not in this packaging at the very least, but there are homebrew replacements using modern surface mount voltage regulators, and you basically buy a PCB in the shape of these packages, which is actually pretty impressive. Also very interesting is the shape of the leads on these. It says L here. I would think those are some chokes or something, or ferrite beads maybe, for, I don't know, RF suppression or something. I have no idea. But the leads are all like angled and messed up, but that shouldn't be a problem. I think. Yeah, anyway, I would probably transplant the other drive's PCB in here and then just clean the head maybe a little bit to be sure that that's not a problem, and then yeah, check if it can read anything. Once that is working, we can put this back in and start swapping chips, because we know on the other board that everything works. Before we do anything, I would like to test out the old PCB once more, because I noticed that this plug here was on this socket, but this is actually the power, and this is whatever drives the mechanism. I think maybe power for the mechanism. But still, even with that, and even attached to a C64, I get a spinning disk motor and a red LED in the front that doesn't turn off. So there might be a couple of reasons for that. First, very cheap test that I will do, because usually it could be the reset circuit, but most of the time, if the reset circuit is wonky, from my experience, if you have a C64 attached, it will reset the drive correctly anyway. But I might just swap out the ROM chips first to be actually sure that it's not that. With a known good ROM chip, basically. And after that, we might swap out the CPU as well to be sure that useful code is actually executing. Those chips here burn out sometimes, so that might just be the simplest solution here. I hope this didn't harm anything, that it was plugged in incorrectly before. Well, we'll see. But that's the first thing that we'll try. So I've picked two new ROM chips from a working 1541, the brown one indeed, not the beige one here, because I can show you. The other one that I got actually uses a short board, it's called. It has different connectors here, so I would have to rewire that. Plus everything is soldered, there's nothing socketed. If necessary, I could harvest chips from here, but as you can see, for example, the ROM chip is only one ROM chip. Both have been combined in there, so that doesn't work, which is a shame, to say it like that. But of course, I could, for example, salvage the VIA chips by desoldering them, or the CPU if necessary, which is still a nice thing. And I've got yet another machine here, also with a broken Mitsumi, and yeah, I could also harvest things from here. Only the CPU is socketed, so I would have to desolder the ROM chips, which I would do if necessary, or I could perhaps even transplant just the whole board, because it's actually nice and clean, or I could just swap out the drive mechanisms. Maybe that's what I'm gonna do, because this got all the wiring harnesses, even the power LED and everything. So yeah, it gets even more Frankenstein-y than that. So let's turn it on. Hope that we inserted everything the right way. Yes. And now, you hear it? It stops after the initial reset. So let's turn it off again and try to use a C64 and see if it loads something. And maybe that's already the fix, which would be nice, but yeah, maybe we'll swap out the boards anyway for the nicer looking one. Alright, so the thing is here. I could run the floppy Diagnostics, but I'm gonna go for broke and insert my Krill test disk with a nice loader test program. Let's first try to just read the directory. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Oh, it says file not found error. That's not good, which is very sad. Let's try the other side. There might be other issues now still, but at least it reacts to commands, which is good, but it can't read anything as it seems. Yeah, we might need to use the diagnostic cartridge for this. So this is the diagnostic cartridge. Alignment check. Yeah, let's just run this first. Okay, I think this is not supposed to look like this. Okay, one more thing that I noticed is that the head connector was on the wrong way, which is also not the best thing. So let's try directory first, and look at that, it works. So people, check your connectors. I'm not sure if I messed this up, which is a very possibility. However, it might have been on the wrong way and I didn't check. Luckily I noticed the other connector first, but yeah. So let's try again. The directory was looking good, I think. Yes, that's perfect. Let's also try to load the program and see if it runs, because it will exercise the drive pretty roughly and in a highly efficient manner. It's one of those IRQ loaders that I was talking about before. And Krill of Plush is supplying other demo groups with this loader for their productions, basically. And it, yeah, I was able to help him test on real hardware, and he improved the performance, especially for my crappy wobbly drives, which is quite nice. So let's run this and see if it loads something or crashes. Might happen. But that's looking good. That's looking pretty promising. Yeah, we'll run this for a short while. Afterwards, we will swap out one ROM and see if it still works, because I suspect there is at least one broken ROM on here. The question is, which one is it? And maybe there's still one good ROM in there, which would be nice, because getting those is also getting harder, of course, every year. And yeah, I mean, you can burn replacement ROMs and that's all fine and good. But if we can salvage one, then that would be very nice. So this is now my working 1541, the brown one, with the suspected broken ROM chip in here. So let's turn it on. And indeed we get a drive spin and it doesn't turn off. So broken reset. However, as I said before, it could be that the reset circuit here is a bit wonky. So we will plug it into the C64. I will turn on the C64 and the drive. And it's still not resetting. Which means this ROM chip, the 901229, is definitely broken. There's no denying that. Which means we will desolder a good chip and throw this in the trash. Okay, let's take one step back. I thought once more. This is the broken Mitsumi drive that I had lying around, still with everything soldered except for the CPU. It has got the broken drive, but the PCB works. I have here the machine that now works completely, except that it's missing its ROM, because I took that out of another working machine, which I put it back in now. So here we are missing a bunch of screws, a power LED. There is also a sticker residue on the case. This here is pristine, doesn't have a working mechanism. This one here works, but has some other messed up things. So I think what I will do now is actually put the drive mechanism from this here over here, because I just need to rip out the drive mechanisms Of course, I have to take the PCBs out, but that's a minor problem. And then I have a very clean, very good drive, which should work. And this can be a donor drive. Basically, I can pull easily one working ROM chip, 2 working vias, and 1 working CPU from here without desoldering. Because here I would have to desolder and I could break the ROM, but it works. So let's not mess with that. I think that's the actual better idea, and this way we get a better Frankenstein 1541 with the nice black mechanism from the older models in the nice beige colored 1541C basically variant. And I think that would be pretty neat. Yeah, so let's do that. So very quickly, this is the dead mechanism, which is actually dead only insofar that the read-write head, which is under here. I think you can see that white rectangle with the black bar. And that's the read-write head. The coils in there are fried, and this is a very typical problem of these Mitsumi D500 drives. It just happens, and sadly, you can't buy these heads anymore, and you can't make them. Currently, that is, my big dream would be that some company could produce, I don't know, 10,000 of these or something for the community to, be able to restore some of these drives to working order, because I think they are pretty neat, and they look more modern than the Alps drives, but seemingly, well, they are not that long lasting. I would love to see things like this get restored in the future, but I have very little hopes that will ever happen, because it will cost so much money to make, because there's probably no factory which can produce these anymore. So yeah, it would be an immense task basically. But of course I will store this and keep it. There's maybe in the future also other uses, like for these motors, like the stepper motor down here, or the belt drive here. I can even still use the belt if need be for a different drive. They are more or less, I think, always the same. Yeah, so this is this. We can swap it out for the Black Alps, and which will be a look that you, I think, could never buy in the store, but, well, who am I to complain? And once more, here's the Alps mechanism, removed from its former home. And I think this was already some kind of Frankenstein thing, because those were the screws it was mounted with. So there are 3 of the same type and a 4th of a different type. And they're all quite different from the ones used on the Mitsumi drive. I'm not sure they used different screws in here. I'm gonna very carefully try to fit in the screw from the Mitsumi, but it doesn't seem to fit. So maybe they used a different threading type here. But I have more of these here, of the smaller variety. I think I will use them because, well, maybe the threading in here now is completely garbage due to wrong screws being used. I think this is the same that is used on the case actually. Yeah, but I will use the short ones here. I think that should be fine. The whole drive assembly of the Alps looks a bit cheaper. It has more plastic here on the sides. There's this cast metal thing, which everything rests on, which is fine. And I think I might want to clean the head maybe. But all in all, it looks not too shabby. And it's working, so I don't want to fix anything that isn't actually broken. So yeah, let's put it in the nicer metal cage. and then put everything back together. And here we are. This thing has now been reassembled. All the connections are correct, I think. We have left the drive as is. We just put in the ARPS mechanism in the 1541C case. We still have this longboard type thing with everything soldered except for the CPU, which is a Rockwell, I think, 6502. And yeah, we can simply plug in the power and turn it on and see if it resets correctly. And if it does, we can have a quick look if it also works with the C64 attached. So first try, it resets correctly. The drive stops, no infinite spin. That's nice. So let's switch it off again and turn on the C64. All right, here we are. Let's try to load up the directory, fingers crossed. And this is looking good. Okay, we get a directory. Let's try to load the program. And that's also looking quite okay. So let's run it and see if the drive works or if it crashes immediately. But I think it should be fine. Yeah, that's actually looking good. So we have our little Frankenstein 1541C with the black ARPS mechanism, with a very nice board in almost pristine condition. Yeah, I will put it back together. I now have two boards for spares, basically, with two broken mechanisms. But that's, of course, a nice thing to have some replacement ICs and stuff. But I will, yeah, close this thing up, and I think that's a success. Okay, so that was the Frankenstein 1541. Because this you couldn't buy in the store like this with the dark ARPS mechanism. There were, I think, light colored, like beige or cream colored ARPS mechanisms, but I haven't seen them so far. I think the two examples that I have with the white case, which is the 1541C, I think, I'm not sure, because it probably, yeah, I don't know. Is called like that, I have to look that up. They usually came with the Mitsumi drive here, it seems. But actually, I love the latching mechanism here. It seems very arcane and retro. And it seems they built the better mechanisms. They are mostly still alive nowadays, while the Mitsumis are all gone. Anyway, I also like the look of this. It definitely looks a bit like the Atari drives, for example, with the light and dark color scheme. This is actually almost my most well done drive that I now have. It's also pretty quiet. The other two 1541s in this case that I have that work are pretty noisy due to the mechanism inside, and there's some washer and some rings at the top that start to squeak and things. You can fix that, but this one doesn't have that yet, at least. So I like it very much. One thing to note, I earlier said that the shortboard isn't compatible. I think that's wrong. I looked at it more closely and I found all the plugs basically go to different places, plus the LED, the power LED is not prepped with a plug, but it's directly soldered to the PCB. So there are a lot of cost-cutting measures in the shortboard version. So if I can get my hands on another working ARPS mechanism or even a working Mitsumi mechanism, which is not that common, I could restore the shortboard drive as well. But for now I have this drive working, and I think it turned out pretty nicely. I like it very much. I put it through some paces. I ran some demos off of it. It did that without a hitch. So I think it's definitely good for hopefully another 30 or 40 years. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you will join me for the next videos. So share, like, subscribe as usual. If you want to support me, you can also drop me a coin on Ko-Fi or Patreon or PayPal. The links are all in the video description. If not, that's fine with me as well. But I definitely hope that you check out my next videos as well, and all the past ones if you want to. That's it for today, and have a nice evening. Bye!